Hey everybody, today I am reviewing Spectre, which is the 24th Bond film, and I think the fourth to star the very steely-eyed, masculine Daniel Craig. This is directed by Sam Mendes, who is probably one of the more critically acclaimed directors to take on the Bond franchise. He also directed the previous Bond film, which was Skyfall. I loved that film. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It was just a very mature, sophisticated, dare I say, thought-provoking addition to the Bond franchise. And I honestly thought it was one of the best Bond films I've seen in a long time, if not one of the best Bond films that I've ever seen. So naturally, when I found out that Sam Mendes was returning, I was really excited, very intrigued, especially when they started casting people like Christoph Waltz as the villain and people like Monica Bellucci. And probably more than anything else, I was just really intrigued to see how they would continue to redefine the James Bond that we know and love, the classic one from the 1960s, and see how they would continue to redefine him for a grittier, more cynical age, the 21st century. I was surprised by this film, but not really in a good way. I think it was just a very run-of-the-mill, very safe Bond film that did not continue to push for any sort of exploration. It's not a bad movie. It maintains your interest for 2.5 hours, however long it is, but it, to me, was just very underwhelming. I honestly don't even think I need to get into the intricacies of the plot because there's very little deviation from that formula, that classic formula that we have all seen in every other Bond film. And I don't mind that so much because no matter what, this is still a blockbuster film that is very commercial and needs to appeal to the masses. So no matter what direction the Bond films go in, they're not going to change that basic formula. We like that formula. We like the security of it, the romanticism of it. But even in those constraints, you still have the chance to create variation and make something more memorable, like memorable characters, memorable villains, well-crafted action sequences, etc. But for me, this film tended to just stick with the nostalgia on a very basic level, in the sense that it just felt like a bunch of cut and paste pastiches from all kinds of other Bond films that we've seen, almost like a collage, without really rising to the occasion and becoming inspired by that nostalgia. And it gave a sense that it was just kind of going through the motions, checking off the cool car, the hot chick, the white tuxedo, the martini, without any sort of joy. Because the Daniel Craig era has gone on for about the last 10 years, I think we have sort of gotten used to a certain style of the films that he's done or been involved with. And I really like the idea of the fact that they're delving into what makes Bond so charismatic and so mysterious, while also making a commentary on the changing world and the idea that organizations like MI6 may be less and less relevant, particularly in a digital age and one that is growing into more conglomeratism. Casino Royale is probably one of my favorite Bond films of all time, and I love that one because we got to see what made Bond how he is now. It was more about his misogyny and his coldness and where that came from. And then you had a film like Quantum of Solace, which I know a lot of people didn't like that one. I thought it was okay. I enjoyed it. But I liked that sort of the idea that he was plummeting further and that he had that maternal person in his life, M, the Judi Dench character, who kind of helped him through that. And then you had Skyfall, which to me brought both those themes from Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace together and blended them in this really harmonious way. And you had a fantastic villain played by Javier Bardem to bring all of that together. He was sort of the glue and the core ideas that built the foundation of that particular film. And because of that, the stakes were much higher. The emotions were higher. There was just more at stake. It was more dramatic, and it had a nice way of building tension. And this film just sort of lacked that. And it wasn't... There were moments that I liked. There were scenes that I enjoyed and I was entertained by. There were other parts of it I thought that were tedious. I wasn't that impressed with any of the action sequences, to be quite honest, except for maybe the first one. The first one, which takes place at the Day of the Dead festival, was really cool, the way that they did the opening shot. It's a really, really long shot that was impeccably well choreographed. But I never was really invested in it, and I think the reason why is because, again, the stakes weren't that high. We didn't really know what was going on. in the same way that we did in Skyfall, as well as even Casino Royale. I love that opening sequence just because of how original it was. But a major plus for me in this film was the Bond girl, and I can't pronounce the girl's name, but I've seen her in a few films, but I've never seen her at the forefront of like a big blockbuster movie, and she was fantastic. She's a great actress. She more than held her own with Daniel Craig. She's very alluring, but not in an overly forced way. You know how a lot of the Bond girls are just trying so hard to be smoldering and mysterious, and for her it just felt so easy, and you felt the sense that she had that dark past. But what I loved the most was that she was a strong, independent woman who did not need somebody like James Bond to help her, at least in the second act. Third act, maybe a different story. It was her chemistry with Daniel Craig that really was intriguing and maintained my interest in the second act. But in the third act, it did fizzle off. That's been my problem with a lot of the James Bond films in the past, is that they just don't build to a satisfying climax in that final big battle, whatever. I think the main reason why the third act did not work is because the villain was not very strong at all here. And that's what you need to really tie the film together and bring it to a close. As much as I love Christoph Waltz, I mean, he's the fucking Jew hunter. I mean, he's just born to play these kinds of roles, these sniveling, scene-chewing villains, but I just never felt like he found the music in the dialogue, and he never found that ability to ease into it in the way that he does with maybe Tarantino dialogue and really allows that to sing. But I don't think it's entirely his fault. I think that it's also the script. The character, the villain, is just very boring, very uninteresting. And like the rest of the movie, his character is just kind of like a bunch of recycled cliches that we've seen from other Bond films. Just the way he's dressed, the way that they build him up. He's in shadow to be very ominous, and he's got a white cat and the scar, and it was too much of the same. So I'm not really sure what direction the Bond films are planning on going, if they're wanting to kind of regress and go back to something very pulpy and fun, or if they wanted to keep taking those chances, because after this, I think that his identity, or the identity of the character and what direction they want to take him, is a little bit blurred for now. If this is Daniel Craig's last film, you know, it's kind of unfortunate, and I wish that there were a better conclusion, but if not, then hopefully they'll do better next time. So if you like James Bond movies, go see it. See it, matinee price, it's harmless. It's just, I wanted a lot more, particularly because I am a Bond fan, like every other American. So that is my review. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, the link is below. And you can also like my Facebook page and the link below that. Catch you next time.